Good afternoon. Today is Monday, December 14th, 2015. My name is Edna Sussman. I'm a reference librarian here at the Half Hollow Hills Community Library. We're interviewing Morton Laurence, an Army veteran of the Korean conflict, as part of our Veterans Testimonial Project and in collaboration with the Library of Congress's Veterans History Project. Thank you so much, Morton, for your service and for being here today and participating in our project.
Well, Edna, I tell you, it's a pleasure being asked to come here and record what experience I've had with the service. As you mentioned, it was a Korean conflict, not a Korean war. Unfortunately, at that time, it was called a police action, and the president ordained a conflict with the North Koreans without having the Congress approval. I was drafted into service back in November of '51, and had no idea what lay before me. After Whitehall Street, I was taken to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey, where I went through some sort of indoctrination, and I got my uniforms and all, but it was, at that time, very light felt. We never felt we were in any danger of any sort.
Was that where you did basic training?
Yes, no.
No.
After about 3 or 4 days at Camp Kilmer, they boarded us on a train and took us to the utmost armpit of the world, which was the Ozarks in Arkansas. And Camp Chaffee, Arkansas, was established for the training for artillery and photo observer training whatsoever. And at that point, we were all advised that we're all going to Korea and you had no other option. And that, of course, now put the reality of life into what I was headed for.
Now, before you go any further, let's just get a little on your background, if I may.
Okay.
Where and when were you born, Morton?
I was born on June 23rd, 1929, in Brooklyn, New York.
Brooklyn.
And lived most of my youth there. Mm-hmm. In those days, you lived in an enclave of family around you. Never were we far spread like they are today. I had aunts, uncles, and grandmothers in the area where I lived. And it was a very safe community. And all my friends were of the same social background and economic background. So there was no conflict with one being wealthier than the other. Mm-hmm. Stickball was our thing. Mm-hmm. Occasionally we would sort of snatch a potato from the local farm stand and put it in ashes on a fire. We called those Mickeys, and we ate them. They were terrible, but you had to eat it because it was part of indoctrination into your youth. Stickball was the thing, hide and seek, kick the can. Those are the kind of games we played as a street kid. Of course, those are gone today. Children have no idea what you're talking about.
No, they don't.
Today it's play dates. We didn't have a play date. We just hung out in front of the house, in front of the stoop, and once you showed up, the game started, and that was it.
Well, did you have siblings that were with you then, that played? You had siblings?
My siblings, I've got 2 sisters, an older one and a younger one. I was the sandwich. And we lived in a 4-family house with 2 bedrooms. So my sisters got the bedroom, and luckily I got the cot for the living room.
Oh, and what were their names?
Ruth and Paula.
Did they serve in the military at all?
No, they did not. No, they did not.
And what about your folks, your parents' names? And
my father was an immigrant from Russia. Mom was born in this country here. And the very interesting story was that when my father came over, my uncle, one of my uncles sponsored him. And he got a job working for my grandfather owned a bakery at that time. Mm-hmm. And my father was looking for a woman to marry. My mother worked in the bakery 7 days a week and really had no social life because her parents owned the bakery. But every weekend night, my father would dress up spiffily and walk back and forth in front of the house where my mother sat for rest to get her attention. And my grandmother was also an immigrant, would tell my mother, what do you want him for?
From Russia, too.
Yeah, he's from Russia, too. She would say, what do you need him for? He's a greenie. He's a greenhorn. But she forgot she came from Russia also. Mm-hmm. But nevertheless, my mother and father became a thing. They got married. Mm-hmm. And lived in Brooklyn. My father had his own bakery route at that time. And that was his background. Mm-hmm. In fact, he would work from 2 o'clock in the morning, no matter what the weather might be, to make the rounds. It was a tough job.
Sure.
And one summer, I offered my father, I'm going to work with your dad on the truck to help you out. And he said, "You put one foot in that truck and it'll break your leg."
Why?
Because he had no intention of having me exposed to the kind of life he had. He wanted me to be a better person with a better job and a better future than he had. Because he struggled all his life.
Wow. What were you doing before you entered the service?
What was I doing? I went to a high school called Brooklyn Technical High School. Brooklyn Tech is a school for engineering. It's a required testing to get into the school itself. It's like Stuyvesant, which is science. Brooklyn Tech was engineering.
Did you have an interest in that, or why?
At that time, I thought I was. I thought I wasn't going to want to be an engineer. But the 4 years, I realized that it really wasn't for me. I wasn't a so-called detail man. I was more of a big picture kind of guy. But I still went to college. I went to Brooklyn College, got my degree in marketing, which again meant nothing at all because it had no coordination, no connection with engineering. But engineering to me wasn't my thing. I realized after 4 years of struggling through school that my father was very happy I went to Brooklyn Tech because it was an honor to get in there. But nevertheless, I just didn't want to be an engineer. And after Brooklyn College, I got a job in sales working for a small company, selling decorative bath items, artificial fruit and flowers. And I traveled throughout Ohio, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, traveling as a traveling salesman. I felt I was more at home doing sales than anything else.
And you liked it?
I liked it. But the company was going nowhere. It was a small company. And I saw an ad in the paper, New York Times, asking for a salesman for a major brand company. Didn't mention the name. I answered the ad, and it wound up to be Playtex Corporation.
Oh, wow.
Right. Which wasn't, and they had those days, you were allowed to give tests to employees. And they were called the Wonderlic tests for experience, knowledge, and foresight. That was not a problem for me.
Before they hired you?
Right. You had to take these tests. It was called the Wonderlic test. And today it's illegal to give them because it's discriminatory. But in those days it was okay. Nevertheless, I got the job working for Playtex. And I was assigned to an area originally to cover New Jersey territory. In the interim, what happened is one of the salesmen from Brooklyn left the company. And I was offered the job in Brooklyn, which I was born and raised. So it was like coming back home, so to speak. It was beautiful. So about 4 years, I worked the general area with Playtex products and all as a salesman. I was called into the office and said, because of your background and because of your experience, what you've done, we want to appoint you as the assistant to the vice president of sales.
Wow.
So of course, I had no other option but to take it.
Sure.
And I worked in Connecticut for about another 4 years or so. And then that was a stepping stone to management. They said, the California district is now available. Now, if you want it, you can have it. Now, in those days, we weren't really travelers. My wife and I were Brooklyn born. Her mother had no idea what California was.
Wait, so you were married? When did you get
I got married in August 31st of 51, before I went into service.
Okay, and that was when you were with Playtex already?
Right, no, I was still working with that traveling company, okay? Then I went to work for Playtex. Trying to get my time slots available online here. So, working for Playtex, they moved me to California. My wife and we had one child at that time, went out there, and somehow or other, we found California to our liking. My wife was homesick, of course, but we had a lovely home out there, overlooking the mountains. California at that time was growing. There was a mass exodus from the East Coast to the West Coast. So it was growing, and so was the business. I was assigned to cover everything from Seattle, Washington, Portland, Oregon, and down to San Diego, California, and as far east as Las Vegas, Nevada.
Wow.
I had 11 men working for me, and I was a sales manager for the area. It was a great life. We traveled an awful lot, saw a lot of the Western country, and it was just delightful. But a call came one day that advised me that the New York territory and district is open if you want it. Well, of course, I loved California. I fell in love immediately with it. And I turned to my wife and said, look, we've got this offer. What do you want to do? and only as wife's logic can be, she would say, our roots, our family, and friends are back in New York. Let's go home.
How old was your child at the time? In school already?
Susan was, we had two children at that time, Susan and Lisa. Arthur was home with my grandmother. Susan was, I want to say she's about 10 years old.
Oh, so in
Lisa
school.
was about 6 years. They were at school. Oh, yeah. And my wife learned how to travel on the freeways, which was a horrible experience for her, because the freeways are not like New York, not like the LIE. You traveled, you moved, you didn't move, they run over you. You know, it was terrible. But she managed.
Okay.
She managed very well. Anyway,
Okay, sorry, we had a little battery issue, and now we're back with Morton Laurence. Go ahead.
all right, so as I was saying, we left California and came back to New York, was assigned the New York district. Just let me back up, if you don't mind. I want to fill a gap, which I had forgotten about, unfortunately. When I got out of service, I'm going to figure it out now. Let me figure this out now. No, beg your pardon. We came back. I'm trying to remember the timeline, if you'll excuse me on this
Sure.
over here, because I left out a gap of my life experience.
Okay.
Prior to Playtex,
Okay.
and the California experience,
Uh-huh.
I was first working after the sales, prior to the sales job. I went from engineering, which I didn't like, and went to marketing school. I then got a job with Abraham and Strauss.
Oh.
That's my filler,
Okay.
as a buyer of housewares. I started in the Brooklyn store, then went to the Hempstead store and Garden City store. Hempstead, A&S no longer exists, but at that time, it was a very, very fine store to shop. At that time, one of my vendors offered me a job traveling with the artificial fruit and flowers and with the baskets and all, and I took that job. And then thereafter, I left that after about 2 or 3 years, and then went into the Playtex jobs. That
Okay.
fills the gap over there.
Right, good.
Okay?
So then you moved back to New
So I
York.
moved back to New York and worked there, covered the New York district, and then I was promoted to the Director of Trade Relations. And what that meant was I was supposed to contact all the executives of the various corporations that we do business with and arrange conferences with them, with my bosses, at seminars, at conventions, at private meetings, and even making calls on my own just to solidify a relationship between Playtex and Kmart, Walmart, Target, all the major brand companies that we would do business with to make certain our relations were solid.
Okay.
So I did that up until, 1906. I was there 30 years with Playtex,
Wow.
doing this sort of thing.
Wow.
And it was a great, great relationship, a great experience and all. And
But in between, you were drafted.
then I was drafted.
Yeah.
Now, I was drafted in 51, all right? I went into the Army.
Now, you had no choice with which branch.
Well, what was very strange, my situation was that at that time, the recruiting for the Marine Corps was very lax. Nobody wanted to go to Korea as a Marine. So when you went down to Whitehall Street, they would, every third or fourth man would be stamped USMC on their application. And I've seen grown men break down and cry because of that. I was fortunate, U.S. Army. And again, like I say, I was assigned to Camp Chaffee, Arkansas for artillery training. And at that point, I was pulled out after about fourth week of artillery training, and they said, because of the marks you got on what they call the AGCT test, when you took in the Army, they were so high, they want to send me to CIC school.
What is that?
So I had no idea what CIC meant, but they said you have an option, either CIC or OCS. Now, I could have gone to Officers Candidate Training School, but at that time, in the Korea War, they were flying second lieutenants to Korea as forward observers, which was the most dangerous job you could have. CIC, I found out, meant Counterintelligence Corps. CIC, Counterintelligence. Now, that to me sounded exciting. So I had to go before a panel of experts who questioned me about every phase of my background, my intelligence, what papers I read, what articles I read, what was my interest, a thorough investigation, and a conference between 4 or 5 men on a panel.
Wow.
I was accepted to counterintelligence school and went to Fort Holabird, which was in Maryland, training school for spies, if you will. Surveillance, counter-espionage, lock-picking, microphotography, investigation, interrogations.
What's microphotography?
That would be taken with infrared cameras so they can't see the flash of any sort, taking it in the dark. Also taking very close, if you're getting a document they want a copy of somebody else's merchandise or whatever it might be, the camera would go that close.
Oh, I see.
Okay. So I was excited. I think every young man has a desire to play cops as cops and robbers and be the good guy.
Sure.
I was fortunate. I was assigned to the 108th CIC detachment in New York City. At 42 Wall Street was our office. 42 Broadway was our office. We were given civilian clothing, so we would blend in with the people in the street.
How long was that training?
That training was 8 weeks. 8 weeks. We interrogations, like I said, lockpicking, all phases of espionage. That was the era of the Joe McCarthy era, when behind every door was a communist, and every bed was a communist, and any wretch should be dead. So McCarthy propagated that philosophy, and we were trained to be aware that even our best friends could be our enemies tomorrow. And like I say, it was a sort of experience that I'll never forget. It also helped me to be able to talk to people above my rank. In other words, normally, an army personnel talking to a captain, colonel, whatever, would call him sir. The minute you say sir, he knows you're of a lesser rank than he is. We would talk to him by his rank. Captain so-and-so, General so-and-so, Colonel so-and-so, never sir.
Why?
Because sir always noted that you were of lesser rank than he was, and he would look down upon you as far as a source of information.
Oh.
This way, the badge said special agent, our credentials said special agent. We had no stripes of any sort.
Okay.
We worked in civilian clothing. We covered communist rallies, we did surveillances on some army personnel. The function of the counterintelligence corps was to collect data of any army personnel suspected of being on the other side. We'd collect the information, and then we'd funnel that up to the CIA. Naval had their own source. They had it was ONI, called the Office of Naval Intelligence. The Air Force had the OSI, which is Special Investigation. Each branch had its own source of investigation, period. Our responsibility was purely Army personnel and civilians working for the Army.
So you were really checking out your comrades, your other U.S. Army military personnel. You were checking them out.
Right. If there was, we went to a communist rally in Midtown Manhattan. We'd be in civilian clothing. If we saw a soldier appearing at the rally, we would sort of innocuously try to get his name off his badge of any sort. We'd do some surveillance work to see if he really was part of the community of communism. If he had that philosophy that he believed in, anyone with an army uniform would be our responsibility.
I see.
Any civilian that we worked for the government, that we knew worked for the Army, and we felt that they were suspect of being involved in the other side, we would do investigations. We'd collect information from people who knew them, the neighbors, the friends, and go even deeper than that, so that we'd have a complete dossier of that individual and his leanings towards yes or no, towards communism or to our side.
So that was kind of to prevent spying on us. Is
That's
that it?
correct.
I see.
It's also to stop people who had interest in helping the other side,
Right.
either through funds or through proselytizing or documents of any sort. We had to make certain that they didn't go any further than where they were right now. We had to stop them,
Right, right.
like we're doing today, as a matter of fact.
Right.
We weren't as sophisticated then as we are today.
It's probably a lot harder to gather
Worked
information.
very hard, very hard. But we worked 2 agents to a team. My other agent, Aaron Wold, was my agent. We worked civilian clothing. We carried a .38 pistol in our shoulder holster. Credentials, we had special agent. We had no rank whatsoever. And we did that. I did that until 1953, November, when I was discharged. And I was so involved with investigative work, I applied to Naval Intelligence for a job. And they saw the background I had. They were willing to take me at that moment. But they pointed out, bear in mind that, as you probably know, he said, that we'll put you in Nashville for 2 or 3 years.
Oh.
They will move you over to Boston for 3 or 4 years, and they will move you back over here. The philosophy was that when you stay in a neighborhood too long, you get burned. People know who you are, and your effectiveness is lost.
Oh.
And we just recently been married, and we wanted to settle down and to move from here to here. My wife was not really a mover at that time, so we said, you know what? Let's go back to a real job, that sort of thing.
So actually, that was like re-upping after in 1953.
That's correct.
But you decided not to do that.
Because of if they had told me to be stationed at one location, I may have taken the job as an investigator. But because the feeling of moving people around, it just felt that we wanted to settle down for a while.
Sure.
We've been busy with the Army, with having children, and we needed to have the home.
Were you allowed to tell family and friends what you were doing?
That's a strange thing you say that, because I told my dad, I said, Dad, you know what I'm doing, but you can't tell anybody. I tell people I got a discharge, I'm selling insurance because I was in civilian clothing. But he was so proud he would tell his friends, my son is a spy. I said, Dad, you can't do that. You cannot do that. But he just overflowing with pride of that his son has accomplished this. But fortunately, it didn't do any damage. Let's put it that way.
Okay. But in the neighborhoods where you and your wife lived,
they didn't know.
They didn't know what you did.
No, just I was selling insurance at that time. That's a cover story.
Oh my gosh.
I was an insurance agent.
Wow.
I could not tell people who I was working for, what I was doing. So I took the guise of selling a company, Equitable Life Insurance. Very nebulous work I did, but it was a cover story that fit me perfectly as a salesman.
Your wife knew, of course.
Of course, yes, she did.
Yeah.
And she wasn't too thrilled either, feeling there's a danger aspect of it. I recall one incident when I was first training out in the field with an experienced trainer. And we're working at South Bronx, which at that time was a very, very bad area to work at night, collecting information on an individual who had applied for a serious job with the government, and we were checking on his background. And we went to this apartment house, and it was really not an inviting atmosphere. We had our weapons, of course, but I said, aren't you concerned? He says, no, watch. He walks into the hallway, and he yells out, bill collector. And with that, every door shut, every door locked, so we knew we were safe at that point. Nobody would bother us.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was part of the training. It was, like I say, every young man has the desire to work this side of the law. I got it. It helped me in my experience in life. It helped me understand the ability to talk to people at a higher level, to communicate to people at any level. I was always good in writing, so my reports were always in-depth and conclusive. It was an experience like that, like I say, helped me build my future for me.
I'm surprised you didn't want to go into law enforcement after. Isn't that the logical?
Not that far.
I see.
Not that far.
Okay.
I had my taste of it, and I thought, you know what, as part of my life's experience, let me move on to another area.
Right.
And then along came the Playtex job, of
I
course.
see. Okay. Now, while we're still with the military, do you remember your instructors at all?
Oh, gosh.
In the early days of the training?
All I recall is when we went to Arkansas, and our first sergeant was from the South, and we all sat there, and he said blatantly and outwardly, no matter what you do, you're all going to Korea. At that time was the height of the Korean conflict. And we all sat there and he said, you better learn your armaments, learn discipline, and learn what you've got to do to survive. Because there are 200 men in front of me. Of the 200 men, 50 men will not be coming back.
Oh, my God.
So that really put us on the alert to pay attention to what we're supposed to do.
You were never sent abroad?
No.
How was it adapting to military life? Food?
Difficult, because first of all, the eating habit was totally different.
Oh.
Mom's cooking, and the wife's cooking, and you get into the service, and it's mass cooking on a steel tray, a food that doesn't look recognizable. You have no idea what you're eating. You know it's supposed to be nutritious, but so for a couple of days you hold back on eating most of the food. You sort of rebel, but after a while your stomach tells you otherwise.
You have to eat.
You have to eat. So after a while, it goes down, it stays down. It must be good. It's okay. So it was adaptable. The weather was in Camp Chaffee was, we call it the hellhole of the South, Arkansas.
Hot.
It was terrible, cold, dusty, hot. It just the variation was so extreme, and they built the camp in a very dusty area. So when the wind blew, it blew across the field of the camp and all. It was, but hey, this is a service, you know. This
How long were you
it's
there?
not a hotel.
Right. How long were you there?
I was in Arkansas till they pulled me out about 4 weeks.
Okay.
Then I went into counterintelligence school.
Right. Okay. Did a lot of your colleagues from the training go with you to counterintelligence too, or?
Of my company of 250 men, 3 of us went to counterintelligence school.
Did you keep in touch with them at all after?
For a short while. One lived in Brooklyn at the time. He became a window dresser, believe it or not. One became a mortician. He had worked at a funeral parlor, but he was out in, I think it was Chicago where he lived. But that's about it. Most of the guys, after you say goodbye, we'll keep in touch. It doesn't work out that way because you have other interests and other responsibilities.
Sure. How was it socially? Were you able to get off and travel a little when you were on active duty? I mean, did you have time off, or what did you do?
You had very little time. You had Fort Smith, Arkansas, which was the place you would go, getting a free 3-day pass or so. But the activity was the bar and women, if you were that so inclined, and just raising hell with the guys at the bar. That's what you could do, really, as a relief.
How did you stay in touch with family and friends? That time there was not too bad mail, I guess.
No, it was just mail primarily and a phone call here and there.
Now, was there a lot of, Korea was going on at the time?
That's correct.
So this.
Very, very heavy.
Yeah. So how did that impact what you did?
Well, what would be is that because of the conflict so intense with a communist country, North Korea, and Joe McCarthy claiming that every government official is a communist, and every actor and actress is a communist. So the world became confused as to who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. It was our job to determine the good guy so that there's no influence of people who would join or support the communist country like North Korea or Russia or whatever. And we played all intelligence divisions, branches, played a major role in keeping the, quote, the government clean, if you want to call it that.
Did you actually, did you have to apprehend people if you?
Physically, no, but verbally, yes. The reports indicated people that we felt that were leftist leaning or belonged to leftist organizations and showed inclination toward supporting red countries. Yes, I would say that my service primarily was collection of data.
And identifying them.
Identifying them, and then reporting it to a higher authority.
And once you identified people, what happened then to them?
Well, that's a funny thing. We never really found out the total result because we would funnel our information with naval intelligence and Air Force intelligence would forward it up to the CIA. And they would make a determination as to what action to take. Then the FBI would get involved because the FBI was responsible for domestic intelligence, whereas CIA was overseas.
Okay.
So that the CIA and the FBI at that time would work together in collusion to determine who the bad guys are, who to watch them, surveillance. We do a lot of surveillance work on people, watching where they went, how they went, who they associated with, take pictures of them.
They didn't know they were being watched?
No, not at all, no.
Wow.
But it was an interesting, like I say, interesting part of our life. Some of the people you met during the investigations, we recall one, I don't know whether to put it on tape, but I'll tell you, both my Aaron and myself, were assigned to collect information on a colonel that was applying for a very high clearance.
American colonel.
American colonel. And he had given a reference of a woman who was in the Women Army Corps, a WAC, at those days. And she was off base at home. I went to her apartment, Aaron and I. We entered the apartment, showed our credentials, and we wanted to ask about this gentleman, this colonel that was looking for a clearance. So she said, hold on 1 second. So she approached the doorway. We were facing this doorway, and she was wearing a bathrobe. And she dropped the bathrobe, and I looked at Aaron, he looked at me, and this doesn't look too good for both of us. So we very quickly went to the doorway, and we said, we'll be back. We had no idea what she had in mind, but her back was to us. She was naked.
Oh.
Yeah. And we said, this is not good for either one of us. So, because you could say anything we may have done.
Sure.
So we quickly left the apartment. And we reported out to a higher authority that this woman is not reliable as a source of a reference.
You think she wanted to, as a distraction, or she just...
I don't know. We never really found out. Just that we felt that if she turned around or made an approach of any sort toward us, and our job was on the line, because anything could happen, we go back to Korea fighting the war, we said that this is not for us.
Yeah.
And it wasn't worth it, so we just bailed out of the apartment. Yeah.
Wow.
It's an interesting observation. Another time we had...
Where was that, in
Manhattan.
Manhattan?
We'd gone to Westchester one time, and we interviewed a priest, another officer was looking for a clearance. And we talked about the gentleman. Yes, a good man, reliable man, lovely family. His wife, Edna. It says his wife's name is Mary. Where does Edna live? He gave an address. On the other side of town, this colonel had, I forgot what his rank was, he had a wife over here, and he had a wife over here.
No.
He was supporting two women. Neither knew, of course, and the priest only knew the one from over here.
Oh my.
So he mentioned the woman's name, Edna. Mary.
Oh my God.
So Mary lived over here, Edna over here, in the same town, but further apart you can get, and he was maintaining a support for both of them. I don't know. We don't know how he did it, but we reported their facts to our commandant, and we have no idea what happened. But these are things you run into.
God.
It was interesting.
It's like on TV.
Yeah, exactly. And the priest didn't know. He just very, very nonchalantly, oh yes, Edna, lovely woman.
Did they have children, either family?
He had one child with Edna, and Mary had no children at all.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
But he was supporting two wives. And again, we reported what we found from the priest, who was a good source to get it from. And at that point, the higher authority took over.
So it's a shame you never know what the solution, what
It
the
really
resolution
is.
was,
But we went on to another case.
Okay.
You got a dossier of cases to handle. You really had no time to...
Follow.
Sure, we wondered about it.
Sure.
Just that, hey,
But something like that, you find that out, that is food for, that they are not reliable, good sources to
Or
promote.
the man who's
or-
asking for a clearance
Yes.
is not qualified for a
Yeah.
clearance because he's not a reliable man.
Right.
He's
Do you think they pursue them with
Definitely.
the fact that it's illegal to have two wives in this country?
Right. Of course, the CID, Criminal Investigation Department, would then, because he's subject then now to being blackmailed.
Oh, I see.
Because if the enemy finds out, they have their own spies, that this man has two wives, and nobody knows about them, they can approach him, he's in a security department, or has access to security papers, and if you don't give us what we want in terms of papers, we'll report to both wives.
Right, sure.
So he was subject to blackmail. I don't know what happened to him, but we do know that there was action taken to,
That's very interesting.
yeah.
Because, wow. When you finished your service in 53, you said?
53.
53. Then how were you received by family and community? You lived in New York.
Right.
During your service, so
Definitely.
you were kind of close to family.
Right, we lived there, my wife's family, although both families lived, one lived in Long Beach, Long Island, and one lived in the Brooklyn section of New York City, and it wasn't that far apart, so I had access and I had contact with both my mother and father,
Oh,
and her
nice.
mother and father. And
Did you
family.
live in your own, like a regular apartment?
Yes, we had an apartment on, it was called Eastern Parkway near the Brooklyn Botanical Gardens. That was our first apartment.
Well, you weren't supposed to be looking like a military guy,
No,
right? So this
again,
was just normal.
normal guy, right.
Have you remained in, how was the adjustment to civilian life?
It took me 30 seconds to adjust.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
I really had no problem. I really did not.
Good. Okay, because you lived in an apartment?
Right, and I had family support near me, I had friends support who I knew for years and years and years. So it was like coming back and turning the clock back for a short while.
Getting back to the old life?
Right.
Yeah. Have you remained in contact with any fellow veterans?
Just in your, I saw your brochure here, you have Jack Solomon and Dave Solomon in
Yes.
here. Well, Dave and I have been friends for 70 years.
Oh, wow.
And Jack, his brother, his cousin,
Cousin, yeah.
we had a collective unit of five guys, and Dave was one of the five guys.
Wait, while you were serving, you knew each other?
In general, we were kids, since we were kids.
Oh, really?
Going back 70 years, like I say.
Nice.
And Dave, we had other guys, part of our group, and Jack was on the perimeter of the group.
But they weren't in the intelligence with you?
No, Dave was in the Army, he worked in, I'm not quite sure what corps he was, what
I
division.
forgot, right,
Yeah.
yep,
But I saw his name in there, and I saw Jack's name in there.
yes, nice,
So I go back with them, like I say, over 70 years.
very nice.
Yeah.
So when you went, you started working then for Playtex
Right.
after, for 30 years?
That's correct.
And then, after that,
I retired.
you retired. How do you think your experiences in the Army affected your life afterwards?
Well, I think, first of all, on a business level, it enhanced my life. It gave me more of a self-assurance, the ability to talk to people. Right now, I'm fairly active in the theater group. I do singing and I do acting
Nice.
somewhat,
Nice.
both here at the Greens and down in Florida. That helped me. And the social life also. I have no problem meeting people, greeting and talking to people. I think overall it helped me become a more self-assured person, a better person, a stronger person. Because I was a little on a geeky side when I was in school. Wore glasses. I was the shortest kid in my class.
Really?
I was about 4'8".
You're pretty tall now.
Yeah, well, I was 6'1" at one time. I'm now shrinking to about 5'11". In fact, my grandsons, who I stand next to, I look up to them now instead of looking down at them. So it's
funny.
interesting. But it was overall, the Army experience, the military experience, was good for me. I may have complained about the bad times, and there were plenty of them.
Really?
But there were good times too.
Okay.
Plenty of good times.
Do you feel it affected how you view a trust issue with people? Because you had to always be skeptical when you...
Yes, I am. I'm glad you brought that up, because even in today's atmosphere, the environment, what's going on in our country with corruption and the people who supposedly have jobs of trust, you become very cynical.
Cynical is a good word, yeah.
And it's added to my insight in terms of looking at people. Trustworthy. Can I believe what they're saying?
Right.
You know?
That's a real art, to
Yeah.
be able to see that.
It's not, it's difficult, but you become somewhat a cynic, like I say. The world is not as rosy as we thought it was. In the youth, you lived in a neighborhood, everything around you was great. You didn't know what was going on, because the outside world, communication-wise, so you saw the Fox Movie Tone News in the theater, it was 3 or 4 weeks later. But in your own environment, everything was secure, safe, and you had no fear about anything. But today, for my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, I have deep fear for them, I really do, for the way the world is going.
You have great-grandchildren?
Yes,
Wow.
I have 2.
2, and how many grandchildren?
6.
So you had the 2 girls, or you have, and,
Susan has 3 boys, Lisa has 2 children, and Arthur has 1 boy.
oh, right, your son.
That's 6. I have a son, I have a boy too, Arthur.
Very nice. Did any of your children serve in the military?
No, they're too young, thank God. They might, the 2 older boys now, one is 29 and one is 27. Hopefully he won't have to serve.
How did the military impact your feelings about war and the military in general, do you think?
It's a waste,
Really?
because today's enemy is tomorrow's friend. The people we fought before, fought against, are our friends today. the people we fought with are not so friendly to us anymore. It's a very fickle time, war is. I think it's a waste of time, waste of men, waste of philosophy, because the higher-ups really don't have a philosophy that how to end it properly, or even to go into war, thinking about what's going to happen. And like I say, I fear for my great-grandchildren, my children, because what I see today happening in the military, sending people into the Middle East, the corruption that goes on there in the Middle East. Our money goes there, it goes into somebody else's pocket. It doesn't do the work it's supposed to do, helping children with schools and medical care and all. And I find that our government, unfortunately, is willing to give money out with no transparency as to where it's going.
Accountability.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a chaotic situation. War, I guess, maybe is essential and needed to be. I've gone back since Roosevelt with World War II. That's when I started with wars, as a matter of fact, and going to the Korean War, up to current wars today, the Middle East. It's all fruitless.
Yeah.
What does it prove? What does it gain? Nothing really.
Right.
You know, we've toppled one government with no plan of how to fill the void, so a radical government comes in.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Very scary.
And we have young men, Korean Memorial, the World War II memorials, all the memorials you see in Washington, D.C., honoring the veterans who have passed away. And you look and say, what did they accomplish? What did we accomplish for them who have passed away?
Yeah.
It's a sad situation.
Very sad. What message would you like to leave for future generations who might hear this interview?
I'm hoping that those who we elect to be our leaders have more foresight, have more strength and determination to give us a better world, give my grandchildren a better world, my great-grandkids a better world, and do what's right with strength, with honor, and with dignity, and realize who your real enemy is. I think it's within us, frankly speaking. So I really sincerely hope you folks will do what's right for us and our country. Very
good. Anything we haven't discussed or anything else you'd like to add? Any experiences you'd like to add?
I think, like I say, I recall very honestly, I was in college. I went to my guidance counselor just to have a conversation. And he said, you know, Mort, I don't think you'd do well in sales. You ought to find another. That was before I went to sales. I don't think you'd do well in sales. You better find another occupation. I looked at him and I said to myself, this man's he's in the wrong job, I said.
That's funny.
He's in the wrong job.
That's funny.
Because I felt selling was my thing, really.
Yeah, and you made quite a career out of it.
And I relate to people well,
Yeah,
and I have the ability to sing and dance my way into their hearts.
Yeah, very nice. Well, thank you so much, Morty, for being with us, for all you've shared. It was really very interesting, and your service. Thank you very much.
It was my pleasure, Edna. Thank you.
Thank you.